Good morning, my name is Stephen Capaldo and it is Wednesday, June 8, 2022. Thank you for listening. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is not really a subject I know very much about, but it's never stopped me from talking about other things, so I'll talk a little bit about it just to give a brief summary of it and some consequences of things that have been going on and what can be done about it, this type of thing, what's happening. But I just wanted to do this because you hear all this talk about we have to obey the authorities no matter what they do, and no matter how evil their actions are, we're supposed to obey them. And it really is. Most of all, it's an incorrect interpretation of the word of truth. That's not what truth says. That's not what Scripture says. The text says. And secondly, this attitude is just kind of an indoctrination. Is that you just accept those things that are not of God, and in an unquestioning way. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what has happened to the Constitution and the Constitutional Republic, and it's happened in other Western countries, in Canada and other countries, and then take it a little bit from there and see where it goes. In the period from 1776 to 1789, the two basic documents were established: the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. In 1789, I think it was, the first president was elected. George Washington. And George Washington, his heart was in the right place, but after he left, 8 years later, having done his best, there were maybe a few other presidents who tried, but basically it didn't take long until, starting in the early 19th century, that period from about 1800 to 1871. In Canada it was 1867, but that period 1800 to 1871, where the military-industrial complex took over the Constitution, took over the Republic, and basically took away what was given to the Americans. What was given to them was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is life. God gives you life. God gives you free will, gives you the freedom to pursue your dreams and to serve people, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to create, and the right to provide products and services, to accumulate wealth and assets without hurting other people. You don't have the freedom to hurt other people, but you do have the freedom to pursue happiness, what is proper to you, your property. And this has been progressively eroded since 1871, and in other countries, other dates, but basically there is really nothing left of what we would call a constitutional republic. And Abraham Lincoln, who's often revered as one of the greatest presidents, he really started this assault upon the states, because, and not to say that there should have been slavery. I mean, of course there should not have been slavery, but really his thing was that the federal government should take authority over the states instead of individual states being like sovereign entities, except that they would join together to represent themselves internationally, but on American soil they would be individual states, and each state would be sovereign. In other words, if you're born in a state of the United States, you're a citizen of that state. You're an American state citizen. But that notion has been taken away by this notion of incorporated U.S. citizenship, United States of America Incorporated, capital U instead of a small u. And so now that you're incorporated, well, you become a commodity. And the enumerated powers of the Constitution, I think that there are 19 of them that really were sort of if you think of the cabinet departments, they're supposed to cover these 19 enumerated powers. These enumerated powers have just been established federally and locally in the individual states as corporations, and money is made on this. If you just do a study on, if you have a U.S. birth certificate, and in other countries as well, Western countries in particular, if you just do a study of what has been done with your birth certificate, how you've been traded as a commodity, your name, not you, not the real you, but your name has been traded as a commodity, and how much money has that commodity made? That really should be belonging to you, but it's not belonging to you at this point. Now that, you never know, by the grace of God that may change someday. But And the issue is, if you want to look in particular at the slavery issue, Lincoln, as I understand it, he really had no great interest in freeing slaves or not freeing slaves. I mean, the slaves were freed and they were given this United States of America incorporated citizenship and then made to work for many years at almost no wages. I mean, they were, a slave by any other name, but they had this sort of history of working for almost nothing in the sharecropping and mines and things like that. And no rights. They had this sort of this corporation citizenship, but really the powers that be, what they decided to do is that, well, if we did this to black people, maybe we can extend this to other people. And the powers that be, who's behind them? Well, you can look at all kinds of people behind them, but basically it comes down to a very small group of people that run the show. They control the money and they control people, and it's the usual suspects that we've always been talking about, Khazarian Mafia and Chabad, and, Vatican and Pope and Jesuits and Communist Party of China and, various and sundry communists and socialists and fascists and this type of thing. And these political philosophies, by the way, I'm going to talk about this later, but they really, maybe in another video, but these isms, this isn't really what life is about. Life is to live in your God-given calling and to create something and serve. I mean, that really is what it is. You don't need isms. It's about each individual doing their own ism, their own service-ism, or whatever it is, calling-ism, but it's not about these man-made systems of capitalism and communism and socialism and fascism, which in the end, they just work together with the government to oppress people. And that isn't really the way God has designed the universe, and it's not what He has ordained for Earth, or the U.S. I mean, it isn't, and eventually it will change. But it is as above, so below. But the so below, it takes a while to manifest because of the distance, right, and the creative design, how God designed the universe. Is that certain things like this cabal that they talk about, it is defeated. So above, when's it going to manifest below? It will manifest below, but we don't exactly know when. But if you want to look at basically what you might expect, because the text talks about Jubilee, in the Old Testament talk about Jubilee, is that after 7 periods of 7 years, and every 7th year you don't plant, you give the land a rest. And that's sort of the principle of Sabbath rest, and we do need physical rest, you have to work that out. We have the eternal spiritual rest now in Christ. But at the end of 49 years, in that 50th year, you have a Jubilee. And it's been at least 50 years. We probably have 2 Jubilees, but let's just say the last 50 years that the cabal, the powers that be, have been doing everything they can to run down humanity and enslave humanity. But that Jubilee, what does it signify? It means that certain things are removed, certain burdens are removed, like debt and things like that. I'll go into it a little bit, just to say, how we've all been ripped off, especially in the Western countries. But it's also to restore. It's also restitution of certain assets that have been taken over the years. And that is in the Word of God, that there should be a Jubilee, every 50 years. So at some point, it will be below as above, as above, so below. It's just a question of, we don't know the timing. I mean, it's not possible to say what the timing is, but the signs are certainly there. If you look at what's going on now, I would say up until the elections in November, I don't know if you're going to see a lot of huge positive things in public. There'll be some things happening behind the scenes. You may see a glimmer of hope, but I think it will be hard. It's going to be hard until the November elections, and then after that, if what is expected actually does manifest, after that, I think then is more likely that you'll see things coming out in the public, and changes. I just think that, okay, we're in June 2022. I think by June 2023, you might not recognize the landscape of U.S. or planet Earth or whatever. I think things might look very, very different a year from now, even 6 months from now, but a year from now. Now, I'm not a prophet and I don't play one on TV, but I think things might look very, very different a year from now, even 6 months from now, but a year from now. Now, I'm not a prophet and I don't play one on TV, but I think things might look very, very different a year from now, even 6 months from now, but a year from now. Now, I'm not a prophet and I don't play one on TV, But this is just an intuition that I have, is that we're very close to something, and a lot of people say that, and a lot of people make YouTubes and they say this type of thing, you know. And this is, as one guy said to me, it's a good joke. It's kind of a crude word, but he said, you know, any asshole with a laptop can make a video. Well, okay, so you're looking at your basic asshole making a video, and you can make of it what you want. You know, you can check it out for yourself. You know, just check your intuition and discernment and see what you think, right? So anyway, all these, if you want to talk about, you know, potential jubilee coming, if you look at the ways you've been ripped off. I mean, just a little while ago, I was telling you, if you really do some research into the use that has been made of your birth certificate, if you grew up in a Western country, but I'm assuming most people have a U.S. birth certificate that would listen to this, most people, and so check and see how much money has been made. On your name, and check into things like mortgages are it's a very interesting vehicle. That's what they call it in the financial industry, and I have some familiarity with that. With mortgages, I have some familiarity with real estate and financial services and this type of thing. And there are a lot of well-meaning people in, you know, North America who've been trying to get families into their own home, you know, which is kind of a North American thing. And very well-meaning people in real estate and in the financial services sector and banks and different types of housing services trying to do that. The problem is the whole system itself is a scam. Because if you look into the money that is lent, most of it doesn't really exist because of the way that the banking requirements are set. There's something called fractional reserve banking. It means that when you lend out a certain amount of cash, in the form of a mortgage, for example, you only have to have the very small percent of that actually on hand. So you lend out $200,000, you know, you probably don't even have $20,000 to cover that $200,000, and yet the person borrows all that money and has to pay back the full $200,000, most of which doesn't exist anyway, plus interest on top of it. Well, think how the banks like that. I mean, that's good, isn't it? And there were a couple of famous cases. There was one, I think, Credit River, and another one, another couple that went to court. There's been a couple of cases where it's been established in court that this mortgage is really a fictional scheme. It's not. It isn't really a real thing, and that it is dishonest. That it is fraudulent. And moreover, I mean, so we get ripped off. You know, the birth certificates, mortgages, and utilities and fuel, anything like that. You know. Energy is free. Energy is from God. I've said this before, and it's just this whole utility and fuel system that's been set up. I mean, and look at what goes on. Look at how quickly gas prices have gone up, and people just bite the bullet. Oh, I got to get to work. You know, I got to do this. I got to do that. And you know, we'll see how it goes with you know, gas prices and in inflation and food supplies and all of this summer and fall. But I don't expect that it's going to be easy. And then just taxes in general. You've got the IRS, which is really, it's not even a government department, it's a private agency that's just, in 1913 a constitutional amendment was passed that now this type of tax could be collected, whereas before you could only collect tax in a certain way, but you know, this income tax thing was set up to make it very easy to pay for wars, for example. You know, how does the military-industrial complex, how does it make its money? Well, it makes its money off of war. Well, somebody has to pay for the wars. Look at even since these 9/11. Look at the wars that have happened. You know, the countries that the U.S. has fought with or gone into. Well, somebody's got to pay for those wars, so you have to have this really fake system of taxes, state taxes, local taxes, and it's to pay for what? You know, it's to pay for a lot of things that really we shouldn't be having to pay for. And the system of property tax, if you own a property, let's say even you're free and clear on a mortgage, if you own a property, you're going to be taxed on that, and it's just like having a mortgage, right? And I was looking at my property tax bill a while back, and I'm actually paying principal and interest, my quarterly payment that I make. It's all the payments, they're a payment of principal and interest. So what that means is my municipality at some point took out a mortgage, to fund itself, and the property tax owners have to pay that. Well, okay, so people will say, well, yeah, but the property tax, it's it funds some public services. Well, okay, let's see what those public services are. And I would say get rid of the property tax, that amount that you pay, and then maybe your state tax goes up by half of that amount or something, and it pays for these things like the roads and such. But why is it that a municipality has the right to take out a mortgage, some kind of mortgage, and make you pay for it? And even though maybe you own your property, I mean, you do own your property, but you still have to pay the town's mortgage. Okay, so let's at least get it transparent. Let's knock it down to what it really is, the amount, and make it transparent. Some kind of roads tax, or the state tax has a line item for roads. This type of thing. But knock it down. I mean, cut it down by at least 50%. It's. Because what is this? What do all these taxes have to do with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? It's really kind of an anomaly. And then the car tax. You pay in certain states. You pay just because you own a car. Oh, you own a car? Well, okay, you got to pay a tax on that. All right, so okay, you put the fuel and the utilities you pay, and then the car tax itself. How would anybody get ahead in such a debt slavery system? And this was not what God designed for people. This was not what God designed for Earth. This is not what God designed for the U.S. or whatever country you're in, right? And then all of these other documents that go with car owning, like a car registration, your license, all different fees that come like that. That you have to pay for it just because you own something, just because you created something and maybe accumulated some wealth and some assets, or provided a product or service to someone, and now you have to pay for it. You can't really enjoy the fruits of your labor because you are constantly caught on this treadmill, and you can't slow down, otherwise you're going to, you know how it goes. You watch the cartoons and stuff, you kind of fall under the treadmill and you're on your back rolling around under the treadmill. You can't do that. You're going to stay on the treadmill, right? And so these are just some of the ways in which this theft is perpetrated on people, and a lot of it goes to finance all of these wars. Now, so eventually we get a jubilee. But the point that I wanted to make is that faced with all of this, there is kind of a movement that, if you go and you file enough paperwork, you can kind of get freed of this system, but you have to file a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of pitfalls in filing that paperwork, and you have to go to these same courts, which are illegitimate courts, law of the sea courts instead of land courts, and you can look that up. It's a kind of a complicated thing to explain. But we are really controlled by the law of the sea and the United Kingdom Bar. That's what runs the legal system for its own convenience, and the whole government is run for the government's enrichment and whole convenience. These enumerated powers are just corporations that make money, and you don't get any of that money. So you can, and there are some good resource materials if you want to read about that, is how you could free yourself from this law of the sea or admiralty law system and go into the true common law system, which is what will be coming. But it does involve a lot of paperwork, and at this point you're still going to these same courts and begging or demanding. Either you're begging them for the rights that you should have had anyway, or you're demanding, and you get into that tone where you're not speaking in love, right? I think these things are very simple if you just go by the law of love, is that no, you can't do that. I'm sorry, I know you think you have the right to do that, but you can't make me wear a mask, and you can't make me, if you want to take a bold step, you can't make me pay income tax, you can't make me do this, you can't make me do that. You think you can. You've been deceived into thinking you can, but you really can't. You do what you have to do to me, but I'm telling you in love that you really can't do that. You don't have the authority to do what you think you have the authority to do. So you just claim your natural law rights under God, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You claim those rights. You don't complain, you don't demand, you don't speak in an unseemly way, because if you go back to the text, 1 Corinthians 13, that's the so-called love chapter, verses 4 through 7, I think it is. Love is not unseemly or uncomely or something like that. There's a word like that. So you don't go in and just kind of demand, or nor do you beg. This should just be naturally given. So really, that's the way you approach it. And that's a good way to do soul work on your fear, right? Because people are going to be afraid to do that. Well, I can't do that. No, yes, you can do that. But it's if you do it and you repeat that enough, it's going to help you with the fear. And that's really what we're supposed to do is work on our souls so that it is love and light and truth, and it's not fear and worry and anxiety. That's what God wants us to do. That's renewing ourselves in the mind of Christ. That's what it's about. So really, that would be the way to approach it in the meantime. And you have to just be mindful of your calling, that what has happened with the Constitution and constitutional republic and the legitimate forms of government in many countries, especially Western countries. It's a real sickness. I mean, it really is like an illness, malaise, and it's people just stick, especially people who identify themselves as Christians. They just stick to this Romans 13. Got to follow the authorities. Well, you'll follow them into a very unhappy place. I mean, how is that working out for you now, that the evil and corruption that's associated with the authorities and cabal, deep state, whatever you want to call them, how has that worked? How has that worked for people? And how's that going to work for people if you just continue like that? God is willing to do things, open doors and do things, but he's not going to do it if if some people are waking up, being regenerated and restored in the mind of Christ. If it's just some people, God, he needs many, he wants everybody, really. But he doesn't violate free will, so he only opens the doors and brings in his power to the extent that his beloved creation is willing to receive it and wake up in it and do the work that's needed to get away from everything that's not of Christ and get with everything that is of Christ. So anyway, that's just a little bit on that topic, and I just hope that you'll just pray about this. If you have some fears and worries and anxieties, that you will just ask God and ask the Spirit to give you the power that's needed to overcome, and to do it all in love. I get a lot of questions about love, and what is, maybe I'll just close with this, is what is true love. People think of it as physical attraction and romance, and that's wonderful. That's an excellent thing of God. Everything of God is excellent. But really, the higher, the higher and purer form of love is what happens in the soul and the spirit. So agape. So keep that in mind and walk in that way, even with these people who behave in a wretched way, in a very evil and corrupt way. Don't give up that ground to them. So anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.